The funeral procession stretched for blocks. Black limousines, decorated military vehicles, and thousands of mourners lined the streets of Arlington. But at the checkpoint, tensions were rising. "Sir, you can't enter without proper identification," the security guard said firmly to the elderly man standing before him. The old man's weathered hands trembled as he reached into his worn coat pocket. His clothes were simple, almost shabby, compared to the sea of military dress uniforms and formal attire surrounding him. I don't have those papers," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the crowd. Behind him, whispers began to spread. "Look at him," someone scoffed. "Probably just some homeless guy trying to get inside." Another voice chimed in. "This is a hero's funeral, not a charity event." The security guard's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, sir, but without proper credentials I cannot allow you entry. Please step aside." Welcome to Grateful Stories, where we uncover the extraordinary moments that reveal the true character of ordinary people. Today's story will remind you that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes the most unassuming person carries the greatest honor. Let's uncover what really happened on that solemn day when an old man's presence at a military funeral would shock everyone present, including a 3-star general who would soon change everything with 4 simple words. The funeral was for Colonel James Mitchell, a decorated war hero who had served his country with distinction for over 30 years. He had died at the age of 52 from complications related to injuries sustained during his final deployment. The military community had gathered to honor a man who had saved countless lives and embodied the very best of military service. Samuel Rodriguez was 78 years old. His back was bent from decades of hard labor, his hands scarred from years of working with tools and machinery. He lived alone in a small apartment across town, surviving on Social Security and the occasional odd job. To most people who passed him on the street, he was invisible, just another elderly man trying to make it through each day. But Samuel had a secret, one that connected him to Colonel Mitchell in ways that no one at that funeral could possibly imagine. As the crowd at the checkpoint grew restless, the mockery became louder. A woman in an expensive black dress turned to her companion and said, "Security is getting too lax these days. Anyone thinks they can just walk into a military funeral." A young man in a crisp suit shook his head in disgust. "Show some respect for the occasion, old man. This isn't the place for people like you." Samuel's eyes filled with tears, but not from the cruel words. He was remembering another time, another place, when a young soldier had looked at him with gratitude instead of contempt. The security guard's patience was wearing thin. "Sir, I've asked you politely. Please move along or I'll have to call for assistance." Samuel nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. He began to turn away, but stopped when he heard familiar voices approaching. A group of Colonel Mitchell's family members was walking toward the checkpoint, their faces etched with grief. Among them was the Colonel's widow, Maria Mitchell, and their teenage son, David. As they approached the security point, Maria's eyes fell upon the old man being turned away. Something about his face seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. The crowd continued to murmur disapprovingly as Samuel stepped aside. He found a spot near a tree where he could watch the proceedings from a distance. His plan was simple. He would pay his respects from afar and then quietly slip away. But fate had other plans. A black sedan pulled up to the checkpoint, and out stepped General Patricia Hayes, a 3-star general who had served alongside Colonel Mitchell for many years. She was known throughout the military for her sharp eye and even sharper memory. As she approached the security checkpoint, her gaze swept across the crowd. That's when she saw him. Samuel Rodriguez stood beneath the oak tree, his head bowed in silent prayer. Even from 50 feet away, even after all these years, General Hayes recognized him immediately. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she quickened her pace. The security guard was still dealing with the crowd when General Hayes strode up to him. "Soldier," she said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of command. "Who is that man over there by the tree?" The guard followed her gaze. "Oh, that's just some old guy who tried to get in without credentials. We turned him away. He's probably homeless or something." General Hayes' expression turned thunderous. "That man," she said, her voice rising so that others could hear, "is Samuel Rodriguez. 26 years ago, he saved Colonel Mitchell's life." The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned toward the elderly man by the tree, who seemed unaware of the attention he was drawing. General Hayes continued, her voice now carrying across the entire checkpoint area. "In 1999, Colonel Mitchell was a young lieutenant serving in Kosovo. His unit came under heavy fire, and he was trapped in a burning vehicle. Samuel Rodriguez, who was working as a civilian contractor, ran through enemy fire not once, but 3 times to pull wounded soldiers from that wreckage. The mockery that had filled the air moments before was replaced by stunned silence. Samuel saved 4 men that day, including Lieutenant Mitchell. He carried each one to safety on his back, even after taking shrapnel in his own leg. He never asked for recognition, never filed for medals or compensation. He just did what needed to be done, and then quietly returned to his work." General Hayes turned to face the crowd, her voice now booming with authority. "Every single person that Lieutenant Mitchell went on to save during his career, every soldier who came home because of his leadership, every family that remained whole because of his sacrifice exists because this man risked everything to save him 26 years ago." The security guard's face had gone pale. Around him, the people who had mocked Samuel Rodriguez now looked ashamed, their eyes cast downward. But General Hayes wasn't finished. She strode across the grass toward Samuel, who was now looking up in confusion at all the attention. When she reached him, she came to attention and rendered a crisp military salute. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "on behalf of the United States military and everyone whose life was touched by Colonel Mitchell's service, I thank you." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to pay my respects," he said quietly. "Jimmy was a good boy. Even after he became a big, important colonel, he never forgot to send me a Christmas card." The crowd began to murmur in amazement. Colonel Mitchell had maintained contact with his rescuer all these years, but Samuel had never told anyone about their connection. General Hayes took Samuel's arm gently. "Sir, you belong at the front of this funeral, not standing alone by a tree." She turned back toward the checkpoint and raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Let him in. This man has earned the right to honor Colonel Mitchell more than any of us." The security guard immediately stepped aside, his face red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir. I had no idea." But the transformation in the crowd was even more remarkable. The same people who had mocked Samuel minutes before now watched in respectful silence as General Hayes escorted him toward the funeral proceedings. Some bowed their heads in shame, while others began to applaud. Maria Mitchell, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, approached Samuel with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, "James spoke of you often. He said you were the bravest man he ever knew." Samuel shook his head humbly. "Your husband was the brave one, ma'am. He went on to save so many others. I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "You did what a hero does. And because of you, my husband had the chance to become the man he was meant to be." As the funeral procession began, Samuel found himself walking alongside military dignitaries, family members, and high-ranking officials. The man who had been rejected and mocked was now being treated with the honor he had always deserved. During the service, General Hayes made sure to tell Samuel's story to everyone present. She spoke of how one act of courage had rippled through time, affecting countless lives in ways that the hero himself had never fully understood. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached Samuel to thank him personally. They were soldiers who had served under Colonel Mitchell, families whose loved ones had been saved by the colonel's leadership, and military officials who understood the true weight of what Samuel had done decades ago. One young soldier, barely out of training, shook Samuel's hand and said, "Sir, Colonel Mitchell saved my life in Afghanistan. I guess that means you saved it too." Samuel smiled through his tears. "You boys just keep taking care of each other. That's all any of us can do." As the day drew to a close, General Hayes made one final gesture. She arranged for Samuel to receive the recognition he had never sought. While he couldn't be awarded military medals as a civilian, she ensured that his story would be permanently recorded in military archives and that he would receive ongoing support for his medical needs. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when young David Mitchell, the colonel's son, approached Samuel. "Mr. Rodriguez," he said, "my dad always told me that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Now I know what he meant." Samuel placed a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your father was right, son. Heroes are just ordinary people who choose to do the right thing when it matters most." As Samuel finally made his way home that evening, he carried with him something he hadn't felt in years: the knowledge that his sacrifice had been recognized and remembered. But more importantly, he carried the satisfaction of knowing that his moment of courage had enabled another man to spend decades serving others. The people who had mocked him that morning would never forget the lesson they learned that day. In a world quick to judge by appearances, they had been reminded that true worth cannot be measured by the clothes someone wears or the car they drive. Sometimes the greatest heroes walk among us unnoticed, their acts of courage known only to those whose lives they've touched. Samuel Rodriguez spent 26 years living quietly with the knowledge that he had saved 4 lives in a single day. He never sought fame or recognition, never demanded credit for his actions, but on the day when he came to honor the man he had saved, the truth finally came to light. In that moment, everyone present learned that heroism isn't about rank or title or social status. It's about choosing to act with courage when others need you most, regardless of the cost to yourself. The funeral of Colonel James Mitchell became more than a ceremony to honor one man's service. It became a reminder that every act of courage creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Samuel Rodriguez saved 4 men in 1999, but through those men, he had saved countless others. And in the end, when Samuel stood to honor his friend's memory, he discovered that he too was being honored by everyone who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice. This is what gratitude looks like when it finally finds its voice. This is what happens when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things. And this is why we must never judge others by their appearance, because we never know when we might be standing in the presence of a hero. Today's story reminds us that the most powerful force in the world is not wealth or status or recognition. It's the quiet courage of people who choose to help others, even when no one is watching, even when no one will ever know their name. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voices and the flashiest displays, let's remember to honor the quiet heroes among us. They may not wear uniforms or carry titles, but they carry something far more valuable: the knowledge that when it mattered most, they chose love over fear, action over indifference, and service over self. Sometimes the greatest honor we can give someone is simply recognizing their worth. Sometimes the most powerful words are the simplest ones: "Let him in."